And it may not all sink in on the first time, but you're just looking for that one thing.
Oh, you'll get one.
I'm guaranteed you will get one. And this is the same with any book that you read.
This is the Just Real Quick podcast, where we discuss how to succeed in the world of sales through confidence, discipline, and consistency. Are you ready to be intentional about creating more opportunities that lead to sales? Tune into this episode right now for the latest insights and strategies that will take your sales game to the next level. I'm your host, Jefferson K. Rogers.
Welcome back to another episode of Just Real Quick. Today in the studio, I got a good friend of mine and one of the leaders here at JKR Windows, Mr. Joel Taylor, here to discuss our new book list that we just came up with that has multiple levels for all of our leaders and everybody from beginning to way far down the road with the leadership process. And specifically starting with a book that I've read multiple times. I know that Joel has read multiple times and is maybe one of the most popular success principle type of books on the face of the planet, Think and Grow Rich. So one of the things that we put together recently for JKR Windows, because it's important for us as a people development company, is a book list. And with level one, starting off with books that aren't as sophisticated or maybe just a couple of, what are the books called when they're a fiction book, but they have success principles in them? What do you call those?
I don't know.
Like,
Well, you're talking about The Alchemist.
what would you call
The
it?
Alchemist is one of those. I would say that it's not, because it's not, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Something that's more filled with, has aphorisms in it, but it's got a story.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great storyline.
I would call it, yeah.
So as part of the outline of the reading list, it's like, here's a book that isn't going to be super sophisticated. You're not going to get bored with it, and it's not going to be too intellectual for you if you're a reader like I was when I first started. So you can get engaged in some of these success principles, and it's a great story to go along with it. All the way up to a level 5, which has a book like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which is a very sophisticated man. And you can tell when you read it, because it's a lot of language that I didn't understand the first time I read it, and it's a little bit more difficult to get through. But starting with Think and Grow Rich, one of my favorites. I've read it multiple times. Incredible book, incredible resource and tool for me. And me and Joel are going to kind of discuss each of our perspectives on this book and how it affected us as a way to hype this thing up and encourage people to get out there and pick up a book that may just change your life. And on the back of this book, it actually says, read yourself into a fortune. I don't know about you, but I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
So when you just asked me a second ago when the first time I read this book was, which was when I was about 32. I never read a ton. I think the last book that I read before I got into the sales environment was a Goosebumps book in elementary, that I wanted to read myself. So it's been 7 years since I picked up this book for the first time. I've read it a couple of times since. What was the first time you read it?
My dad recommended it, and it was years before. Dude, this book got me ready for you. I read it. These scars are me reading that book, because it took me a year to get through it. A year of donating plasma. And that was my reading time.
Oh.
I would take this book with me. I couldn't find my original copy, but is being up.
What a story. Sitting there donating plasma, not just out of the goodness of your heart, because it was a way for you to make money, right?
Yeah. We've got there's a lot of guys on my team that have these scars. We need to have the scar competition. I think mine are probably the deepest, but we got directors that have them.
Look intense. But as you're reading this book, donating plasma as a way for you to, what I would assume was like supporting your family. What an inspirational opportunity for you to see that there's hope. Napoleon Hill himself came from a really modest background, and a lot of the success stories and the successful people that he interviewed to come up with all these principles, and the people that he references regularly all have similar upbringings. Like none of them had a silver spoon. None of them came from the riches that they ended up acquiring later in life. They've all got these stories and these moments in their life, like reading your Think and Grow Rich while you're getting plasma drawn. What an incredible, incredible story. So tell us a little bit about what transpired, what you got out of that, the seeds that were planted, and how it led you to where you are now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it. Books have changed my life. And this book was just one of them, but this is one of the books that probably, like, just flipping through this book again, getting ready for our podcast, and notice the difference in who I was and what I was picking up then, and just flipping through it now. The context is everything. Yeah, when you're sitting there and you're pumping blood and you're like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. That was my homework, man, right? To get me out of that position where I didn't have to give blood anymore, right? Or to make ends meet. Now when I flip through this and I see those principles, instead of thinking, how do I activate this in my life? Dude, names come to my mind. I'm like, shoot, Carter needs to see this. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, this is a Kea part of the book right here, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, Tyler Freeman needs to read this right here.
And how important from a leadership standpoint for you to be able to read this book. I know I'm going to read it again. I've already read it 3 or 4 times, listened to it, but this is one of those books that's timeless. I think it was published in something like 1938. That was damn near 100 years ago. The first time I read this book, had no idea who Napoleon Hill was, and thought it was like this guy that was currently writing books. And I even asked one of my mentors, I was like, does he do seminars? He's like, what?
Like, are you kidding me?
You don't know who Napoleon Hill is? He's dead, bro.
Yeah, real dead.
I was like, oh, it was kind of embarrassing. But it just seemed like it was so relevant. It's timeless principles that inspired me at that time when I wasn't quite ready for it. But now to go back through it and to be able to pick out some of these things you can use in your leadership journey, in your mentorship, in your development of other people that you have that want to aspire to do great things also, but they're maybe at those earlier stages in the process, and they may not be ready yet, or they just haven't been exposed. And it's a cool opportunity to be able to take these things and put it in front of them and make it relatable. And here's how it could apply to your situation. One of the big things that sticks out to me that I remember specifically is what do they call it? It was the 31 major causes of failure.
Well, he lists them, bro.
And he lists them all.
Yes.
And so not only does it have all of these things that will lead you to success and all the actions and habits and disciplines that can help you to become an incredible human being, but he also tells you exactly the main causes of failure. And those things stuck out to me because there was a number of those things that I was practicing on a daily basis.
It's incriminating to read this book. It's a little bit painful to go through and just even flip through the pages and see what you need to catch yourself up on.
Tons of opportunity here for you to see where you're at right now and apply some of these things. And every time you read a book like this, there's other books too, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've read that one several times. Every time I read it.
Referenced here. He references it. What's interesting, okay, I don't know if, I'm cutting you off.
Let's go.
Once upon a time, Joel, old guy, watched Brendan Fraser in The Mummy. You remember when it came out, everybody was really excited. It was fun.
Love that movie.
Oh, I know. There's so many shooting in there. I mean, it was like, finally, a guy that has 15 guns. Let's go, right? and it was real fun. But what was really funny was whenever in that film, they made a nod to Indiana Jones. And you had to have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark to get it. And so the people that were new to the movie industry, they had no idea what those references were.
Yeah.
This book, there are so many things in sales that we say, so many things that we practice and do, and people don't know where they came from. You want to read this book. Let me tell you about this book. You want to know how old it is. When was the last time you said the word spasmodic? Okay, it's got some real dated language. the great ether hunt of the 1890s. We used to think that there was something when we were trying in quantum physics before the Copenhagen consensus. They were trying to figure out how come light and sound move differently. And they theorized that there's this something called, you're trying to figure out if light moved in waves or in particles, which was the advent of quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And they thought, you know what, there's got to be something like water, but that you can't measure it, that light travels through so that it can move in waves. And they called it the ether. And they had all these series of experiments to prove whether or not there was ether, and they were trying to duplicate it, just couldn't find it. So if you find a book that's written and it talks about thoughts traveling through the ether, that lets you know how old it is. So when I was reading this book and I'm going, A, dated language, nobody says spasmodic or any of these old words.
Yeah.
B, you're still talking about ether. I'm like, wow, this is an ancient book. Holy cow, couldn't believe how relevant it was. And I'm like, whoa, written that long ago. Mm-hmm. And these things are real now. And we still use this lexicon in the industry. We still talk about masterminding. We still talk about transmutation.
This is where the personal development industry was created.
Right here.
Was right here. And his hundreds and hundreds of interviews that he did with all of the most successful people on the planet.
Yeah.
Andrew Carnegie being one of them, which is where a lot of this comes from. He was maybe the most material that he's gotten that I've read from all of his books has come from his interactions and his personal relationship with Andrew Carnegie.
There is a lot of overlap, and that was the second book, right? Mm-hmm. And this one will make you want to read Andrew Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Well, wait, I was talking about, so Dale Carnegie is...
Dale is almost like Napoleon Hill modernized and abridged. I mean, Dale like really draws upon this book. So what you really want to do is go watch Indiana Jones and the Mummy. Then you're going to want to read this, and then go read Stephen Covey. And this will give you insights into the way Stephen thinks. I mean, Stephen
Covey obviously has read this book as well.
Yeah.
He just took his own personal perspective of the book and applied it to 7 specific principles.
Yeah.
And habits of he took a very similar approach as what Napoleon Hill did and went and interviewed highly successful people. And here are the 7 most common habits of all the most effective people that I've ever interviewed.
I almost feel like it's like, because there are so many lists in this book. It's got the list of alibis, right? It's got the list you mentioned. It's almost like this book is the brainstorm, and the idea was to get it all out there and map it. And then Stephen Covey came along and said, that's great, but now let's make it ingestible. Let's boil it down and see what we can cook, how few steps we can get it into. And he gets it into 7 actionable steps. Mm-hmm. I can flip through this book and find any page and find action items for Joel, right?
Absolutely. The whole book is full.
Yeah, the whole book is just a series of
one thing that keeps coming to mind, though, is this is a book, the first time I read it, it's very memorable to me because it was also as painful of a series of events that I ever had to come to terms with in my life about how many things I was doing backwards. Yeah, and I put it down, and I don't know that I ever applied any of them at that time because it made me look myself in the mirror, and I wasn't ready to look myself in the mirror yet. And I was still struggling with drugs and alcohol and a lot of destructive habits.
I was stuck on the needle.
Yep. And this one, for the right person that's ready, that's hungry, that's ready to take their life to the next level with habits and discipline and mindset and all of these things that are in this book can offer you so much value if you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that. It did take me a year to get through it. And I would choose. Okay, so I got my childhood friend. His name was Ryan May, and Ryan May had a little sister, and she would steal his candy. And his solution was this jar full of opened and licked Jolly Ranchers. He figured she wouldn't steal his candy if he opened it and sucked on it and put it in a jar. And he had this whole jar. It was a solid break because they all get stuck together. You know, he can't access any of that, right? So I sometimes will look at my library is a little bit like that. Sometimes like one of my favorite things to do is just go downstairs in my library and open up a book. Like, this is something I did with my daughter. We had like 20 minutes to kill. I said, you know what I want to do? I want to go down to the library. You pick a book, I'd pick a book, and let's just read something from each book. Right. And I knew which books I wanted to pick and share a short paragraph with her. And she just had one book, and it was a series of anecdotes. And so she was reading those. So it's kind of like it's a sample bar. And you're just taking, one lick at a time, and just one taste at a time, and it tastes great, and you have a great time. This is not that book. This book you want to chew on. And it took me a year. This was the elephant. You eat the elephant one piece at a time. I didn't do one piece at a time because you're right. When you find out what you're doing wrong, I needed a week in between the next time I was going to go and give plasma again to think about it and chew on it and see is there anything I can do about it. So I totally recommend that. But by the way, having a book list, most of us, when we come to JKO windows, we might not have done a whole lot of reading. And you look at where most of our guys are, they're either coming out of high school or they're around college age. Maybe they've tried a few semesters. Look, it can sour you from reading when you have somebody telling you what to read. For this class, you're required to read it. You've got to read it. I remember that. I didn't read for probably, I read recreate. I was so scarred from reading that after college, having had all these books dropped on me, art history, my art history book was this thick. And it had pictures, right? So it took me having kids and taking them to the library and then having a librarian challenge me and say, look, here's a book for you. I know you're having a hard time getting back into reading. I see that you're reading for your kids. Do you read for yourself? Gave me a book about Phineas Gage. It was probably geared for younger readers, probably middle schoolers.
Yeah.
And it roped me in, and that's when I started reading again.
That's great.
So I think part of what we need to do is acclimate ourselves to reading. This might not be where you want to start, but that you have a reading list where people can entry level. Start with the thin books. Exactly what to say. As a man thinketh, right?
Absolutely. There's a couple of really good ones. The Traveler's Gift is one that I recommend. That's another one of those. It's similar to The Alchemist, where it's a fiction book. It's got some great success principles and an incredible story and a timeline and back and forth through history. It's incredible experience. And some of these books aren't as much of an experience, but you got to start somewhere. And I remember the first book that I read and how I got back into reading, very similar, was a recommendation from a mentor of mine. It was called All Things Possible. It was a book about Kurt Warner's success story. He was a football player that came out of college, didn't get drafted, went into the Canadian Football League and into the Arena Football League, ended up getting an opportunity to play for the NFL and has this incredible success story and goes and wins a Super Bowl for the St. Louis Rams in his first year. That's awesome. And it's such a memorable experience that I went through. And that book took me a long time to get through because first of all, I'm ADD and it takes me a lot to be able to settle down and calm my mind and to be able to absorb what I'm reading. And I would read 2 or 3 pages and then I'd get all fired up and throw the book down because I was somewhere else for those last 2 pages. And I wasn't in a place where I could recognize it yet. And I was wasting so much time and it was frustrating. And I was telling people that I'm not a reader, too ADD, and my mind isn't designed for reading. But I had to start somewhere, and it had to be one of those books that was experiential. If I had started with this book, I would have never made it through, and I would have probably been still making those excuses today about I'm not a reader, I'm ADD, and I don't have the attention span for it.
I'm so glad to share that because that is so key. You're one of the most. I hope everybody on our team gets a chance to just be in your house and look at your library. Because your library, that's your reading portfolio. And I've seen you walk into that library and you just stare at those books and recommend them. I remember you gave me a Canfield book. Man, for people on our team to understand how well read you are, where you came from to get there, that's a message. That's not just a pie in the sky. That's more like a ladder with rungs. I can start small. I can lick the Jolly Rancher and put it back. I can read a little bit wherever you need to start. I can read a little book all the way through. I can read one that has a plot line before I get to something more like Encyclopedia Britannica of sales. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that's probably the first thing that we would want to talk about if we're going to propose a reading list.
Because there's going to be a lot of people that have those same type of stories, those same type of paradigms that they're stuck in right now about their own abilities and their own attention span and their ADD, and they've just aren't a reader. I told myself that for years.
Yeah.
And it held me back. But I knew that I didn't want to stay where I was. And if you're in a place where you're not happy with it and you don't want to settle and you're not sure what the next step is for you, there's a lot of different directions you can go.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that all the most successful people that I know do, they read.
Yeah.
They're well read. And, some of them have a very similar story to me where they're not incredible readers and they don't have great retention and they can't read fast, but they still read. And as slow as I still read today, I've read as many or more books than most of the people that I know. But I just do it a little bit at a time, and I'm consistent, constantly listening to a book and reading 2 or 3 books. And I've got a couple of Indiana Jones books going, and I got a couple of personal development and leadership books going. And I'm always, always, always chipping away at it. I'm so hungry for knowledge and the next level for myself, and I want everybody to kind of get a piece of that, a little fire under their ass for more knowledge and the next level for yourself. And there's a lot of different things that you can do, but reading is one of the most important.
What we probably should do is talk about some of the tools that are available to make it so that reading is doable for you. Of course, audiobook is always something that we do. We spend hours on the road, right? That's always there. And then we always talk about, we talk about successful habits, something we got from Grant Cardone. Get up 2 hours before you're supposed to be anywhere, right? How hard is it to throw 5 to 10 minutes of a book in 2 hours, right? That's a great practice. The other things, if you get one idea from a book, right? When I'm shopping a book, this is how I shop.
That's another great thing to talk about. Yeah, you're not trying to absorb this whole book.
You don't have to. If you get one idea from a book, it's worth it. When I go and I look at books, I will flip through, and if I see one idea that grabs me, holy cow, I have to buy it. And the first thing I do is I underline that idea in that book, and then I buy the book, right? And that comes home with me. If I only pick up that book once and get a viable idea that improves me, improves the way I think, or gives me a new perspective that I didn't have, then that is worth the price of that book 20 times over.
Sure was. Yeah, and that's one of the things to talk about too, is the perceived cost versus the value.
Oh, yeah.
And we do this to ourselves in so many areas. Like, we convince ourselves that it's not worth the cost right now because of your current financial situation, but you're overlooking the incredible amount of value that you could get out of these couple of pages.
Yeah.
This book changed my life, and it's changed hundreds and thousands of people's lives.
Yeah.
And if you're in a place right now where you look at a book and a price tag that says $7.99, and you're like, you know what? I'd rather go get some Chipotle. Maybe you're not ready yet.
No, maybe not.
But those are some of the shifts that this book teaches you about, with the shifts in your perspective, your belief systems, the people that you surround yourself, and all of the contributors to your current situation. And if you're in a place that you don't want to be in anymore, something has to change for things to change. And these types of books, this one, that book that I recommended for you, which was The Success Principles.
Yeah.
By Jack Canfield.
And you also recommended Urban Meyer, Above the Line. You've recommended a lot. Was it you that recommended Atomic Habits? I don't remember how that came into my life. But
Atomic Habits was a tough one for me. It was a lot of like scientific stuff. But
we got to hear James Clear speak at Door to Door Con the first year that we went.
Yeah.
Wasn't that great? That's the other thing that I would say is, look, if you can't ingest the whole book, find the cliff notes. For instance, Simon Sinek, the wife, you don't want to read the whole book, just go listen to his TED Talk online. It's awesome. And that'll give you the basic thesis. You can get a few ideas out of it and some action items. And then you're at least able to understand when people are talking about when they say Simon Sinek or James Clear.
Yeah. The other ones are, let's just take a look at this list real quick. This list will be out there for everybody to see on our website.
Sorry, I got excited.
And throughout our offices, but there's 5 levels. And with each level, they get a little bit more sophisticated. And some of the first ones, if you're just starting and you want to get into reading, these are some recommendations. The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews, Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones, The ABCs of Closing by our boy Sam Taggart,
Always.
Think and Grow Rich is in level 1, because it is a great book, as timeless as it is, for you to pick up and to start down the road of some of these success principles that will change your life. And it's not that hard of a read. Richest Man in Babylon, another incredible book. Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn and Chris Widener. That's one. Wow. Okay. I think there was only like 3 books on this list that I haven't read. But the reason these books are on level 1 is because they're not that hard to read, and some of them are a little bit more experiential than others, so it's enjoyable for you to start getting into reading again. We need everybody to be leveling up. If you want to hang around a group like this, you got to be leveling up, or you are going to stick out like a sore thumb.
I know there's only 2 ways to go. Take care when you go up or out.
So you got to continue to push yourself and take yourself to new levels, and develop new discipline and habits in your life. Reading is one of the ways that you can do that and inspire the people around you. And it will be, for me, it was during those times when I was reading for the first time, and I was like, it was just pouring out of me everywhere I went. I was like sharing these principles, sharing all the positivity that I was learning. And it's amazing that the speed at which things can happen for you in your life when you're consuming great content and you're surrounding yourself with great people, and these principles are like all this new awareness. It's so exciting to be able to have this new perspective and this list of things that you're now aware of that you've been doing to yourself that just seemed like normal, and everybody around you used to do them, and like the music and the content and the gossiping and everything that was normal is now like this new light shining. I've been doing this all to myself.
Yeah, it is so funny. The mastermind that's another, you'll find that here is, the principle has been paraphrased to, if you're surrounded by idiots, if you're surrounded by 4 idiots, you're probably the 5th idiot. It's just a reiteration of principle in here, but it's not just and it discovers this too. We're the product, not just of who we're with, but what we put in, and that's a simple principle, and it sounds simple, but man, I'll tell you, leverage that principle, right?
Yeah.
What are you putting in? If you're putting in, I understand we need to have mindless time where the brain can unwind. But if I'm spending 3 hours a day on TikTok, you know what I mean?
You need to be paying a little bit more attention to what you
I don't usually do fiction because I like to do nonfiction, because I love nonfiction because I'm at my age where I'm like, I don't feel like I have a lot of luxury to do fiction. My mindless outlet, I've had to bend a little bit because I finally found my daughter wants, my daughter's like, Dad, we never did do anything together. I'm like, what do you want to do? I like watching movies. I'm like, yeah, but you like watching rom-coms, and she's like, I always fall asleep with the nights that she wants to watch with Dad. So we finally found something. So I do have my mindless outlet. We watch an episode of Doctor Who together. Everyone's all right.
Awesome.
And I have that, but I'm telling you, you know what it does? It actually makes me hungrier to go pick up a book.
So yeah. And when you're intentional with your time like that, then it does. When you're doing mindless stuff that's not helping you progress, you can't help but focus on what you can do next so you can progress and keep making these steps in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think the tragedy would be to not have all distraction. I understand that the brain needs to decompress, but if all we're doing is decompressing and a diversion becomes an obsession or it takes over your time, we're not growing.
then you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
One of the things that was coming to mind, and one of my favorite quotes from this book is with each, let's see if I can, I'll just read it so I don't butcher it. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. First time I read that, went right over my head. I wasn't quite ready for that one yet. I wasn't ready to take responsibility for everything that I had created in my life and start looking at it from a different perspective as a lesson and an opportunity for me with each one of these things that had happened, whether it was going to jail or getting my stuff stolen. There's all kinds of things that happened to me that I blamed. I was a victim. This one concept, if you can grasp this and start applying it to your life, it's also the number one success principle in the success principles from Jack Canfield is take 100% responsibility for everything in your life.
I think extra responsibility. What's so funny is how many of these books reiterate the same principles. That's why I really like going back as far as you can, because you'll find so many of them draw upon, right, the older books. You read Dale Carnegie, you read Napoleon Hill. These guys, these who came before them? I don't know of anybody. Do you know of anybody that wrote about this kind of self-improvement before them? Other than like, I don't know, Muhammad and Moses. You know what I mean?
It was the first.
You know,
it was such a cool challenge by Andrew Carnegie to Napoleon Hill, and he took it on. Like, he went to interview him initially as just a young punk kid for a newspaper, and he challenged him, and he saw something in him, and he said, I challenge you to go spend a lifetime taking these principles and interviewing additional people to create something that would change this country. He did it. He's got not only this book, but dozens of others.
Yeah.
Outwitting the Devil.
I was just going to say, you got to plug Outwitting the Devil.
Love that book. Yeah. One of my favorites. And a lot of people that I know, their favorites as well. So his stuff is timeless. I agree. It's incredible. You got to tap into these resources. Surround yourself with people who are reading books. So you've got recommendations. I've gotten recommendations from Joel. I've given him recommendations. And if you're hanging around with people that are recommending that you smoke some weed, or we go partying on the weekends, or thinking about the next vacation and not talking about reading, we just said, I don't know if you picked up on it, but if you're hanging out with four idiots, you're typically the fifth idiot.
Right.
But if you want to hang out with successful people that are above your level, chances are you are going to continue to level up to reach those levels. Start hanging around with people that are successful, that are reading, that are making money, that align with your morals and ethics, which is also important, because there's also people out there making money that are perceived as successful on social media that are lacking morals and ethics. Wouldn't recommend that, but go hang out with people that you want some version of that type of lifestyle in your life and emulate the things that they're doing. One of the things I promise you that they're doing is reading. So pick up this book, pick up another book that we've recommended here today, and start. You don't have to read it all at once. Just start with 1 page a day.
And by the way, there's a library. I brought in my personal books. That's why I couldn't find my copy of Think and Grow Rich.
Somebody borrowed it.
I think I loaned it out, bro. And so if you need to borrow a book, I've got some in the shelf in the Jumpstart room. We're going to be making some books.
And did you see all those books that Katie just bought?
I know. There's a pile of them over in Katie's office.
In each one of our offices, we're going to have a library of all of these books on this list. There's 31 of them. So at any given time, you can come in if you need a new book once you get done. And, we're not going to have like a checkout or anything like that, but somebody else could benefit from that book. So when you're done, bring it back, pick up another one. I really suggest that you read Think and Grow Rich. And it may not all sink in on the first time, but you're just looking for that one thing.
Oh, you'll get one.
I'm guaranteed you will get one. And this is the same with any book that you read. You're not looking to absorb the whole thing. Like, don't get frustrated because you can't absorb things as well as you would like to. Like, I get these same frustrations. I would love to be able to just photogenically download all of this stuff, and it's all a part of my daily habits and disciplines moving forward, and all the things not to do and all the things to do. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, what's fascinating is we'll sit there and envy a mind like Jordan Peterson or David Horowitz, these guys that write, and Charles Kramer, these guys that are like so well read, and when they write, it just, you can tell they're talking about Montesquieu, and they're talking about all the people that they've read, all the classic literature.
You don't do that to yourself.
But they cultivated their minds, by the way. They didn't start out that way. These guys got there by reading and reading and reading. It's just the reps, Jeff. I think you've developed the muscle. And if you're looking at, look, when we go into the gym, we always look at the biggest guy. We're like, dang, that's not me. And the temptation is to never go back into the gym again. So just understand that that's going to be part of your nature. That's just what we do. Just realize that he got there the same way you're going to get there, and you're going to take the little steps.
It is also just a habit too, because we all have a tendency early on in the process and throughout the process at one way or another to compare ourselves to other people.
Yes.
Whether it's in their ability to download information and regurgitate it, or their physical appearance. There's any number of things that on a daily basis, you do it as well as I do, is we compare ourselves to people. But for heaven's sake, start paying attention to how you do that and how it's affecting you. And you get to choose what you got going on up here, and you can make adjustments. And when you see somebody that has something that you want or has some ability that you want, instead compare where you are right now to where you would like to be and how you have been in the past. And if you're comparing yourself to yourself, today you should be the very best version of yourself that you have ever been at any other given point in your life. You can feel pretty freaking good about that.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I don't know for over time. There's guys in our team that have that inner drive that if they haven't had that kind of a day, they'll feel it here. And it's a negative feeling. And a lot of times that's what can drive you, is the avoidance of coming home, looking in the mirror and going, I could have done that day so much better. I didn't give my all that day. If all we do is have that feeling instilled in us, man, and to have these guys that write these books, those are the guys that stoke that spark in you and make you realize, wow, you don't have to live like that. You can live with feeling great about the day you put in.
Fulfilled.
Yes.
And happy.
By living intentionally.
It's important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions about what happiness is and how you get it in the United States. But if you want to live a fulfilled life and a happy life, why don't you?
Yeah.
Like even right where you're at, even if it's not someplace that you want to be, you can be happy with where you're at and in the process that you're in to get where you want to be. And if you feel like that there is going to be some epiphany that happens or some things that you're going to acquire in your life that's going to bring happiness and fulfillment, you're going to be looking a long time.
There's a book called Happiness is a Serious Problem. Is it on our list?
Happiness is a serious problem. Happiness is a serious problem right there.
You can probably put that at level 1 just because it's such a quick and easy read. It's a fun one. That was one
of the books that I'd never read. So that's probably why it ended up in level 5, because I wasn't familiar with it.
Oh, you know what? That's one where you can just crack it and read one principle and put it back on top of the toilet, or whatever.
But it's so important. You can be happy right where you are. It's all in your control. So start auditing how you process thoughts. We're dealing with this all across our whole coordinator team and our directors and my kids and my wife. Everybody deals with some level of this, where everybody's going through some type of challenges with the beliefs that they have in their own capabilities and why things happen to them and why they're at where they're at in life right now. And if you can start to reprogram your thoughts, your beliefs, your capabilities, things can change drastically in a very short period of time. And you'd be surprised how much of the current situation that you're in is all as a result of the way that you think about your beliefs and your capabilities and your outside surroundings. So we're going to keep coming back to you every week with more insights and strategies for sales and leadership and leveling up as a human being on the Just Real Quick podcast. Thank you, Joel Taylor, for coming and visiting today. And if you guys haven't already, please go in and like and subscribe to the Just Real Quick podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review, 5 stars, of course, and keep coming back every week, supporting this podcast. We love nothing more than to bring as much value as we possibly can to help people in the door-to-door industry, replacement window industry, sales industry in general, to just become better human beings and to be equipped with the skills necessary to level up, make an incredible income, and live an incredible lifestyle. We'll see you guys next time.